with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neil Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neil Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, it's another $2 trillion. Didn't we just do, what was it, $1.9 trillion in a stimulus, and that was what we're going to need to do, get this economy roaring?
Yeah, B's mean nothing anymore. Billions are, it's passé.
Oh, that's...
Who cares? We're into trillions.
That's so 2000s. I mean, come on. I mean, but here we go with another $2 trillion. And this ostensibly is for infrastructure. But it's a wish list of the progressive left, and in fact, they're not even happy with the $2 trillion. I mean, they're saying $10 trillion just for climate change. You know, so I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of money. We are mortgaging the future, not only of our children but of our grandchildren, and their children. I mean, this is how far out it's going to take. I mean, it's you just can never even imagine a time when this money would be paid back.
Yeah, what I really like, we look at the words in the 1.9, the COVID relief bill. That really isn't a COVID relief bill. I love how they formulate these things on the progressive side. 9% is going to go to the COVID relief in some form and fashion. The rest of it, well, we figured that out because Cuomo announced this week that he's going to give out up to $27,000 checks to illegal migrants, in his state, as well as to the ex-cons in his state. So now you know where some of the billions are going that are going in the first 1.9. Now we're looking at a $2 or $2.5 trillion bill that's coming up pretty soon that they're going to be debating really soon. What's the reality of that? And the difference between, the reality and the imagination of Bernie Sanders along the way is failure. So I'm anxious to hear the debate on that.
Well, let's start having that debate right here at Made in America. We're very pleased to have with us Allison Schrager from the Manhattan Institute. Allison, welcome to Made in America.
Hi, thank you for having me. So
another cool $2 trillion. And President Biden is going to have a lot of pressure from the left that's just too little. It's just too little. And it should be much greater than that. But in infrastructure, I mean, who can argue with infrastructure? Personally, I spent a lot of time living in Asia, traveling around the world. And you go to these cities and you see these beautiful elevated highways and high-speed trains, and you see these beautiful new shiny airports and so forth. And it is true that, I mean, our infrastructure in some places, in many cases, is crumbling, and it does need some attention. But this is not where this money is going to go to, is it?
No, I mean, some of it, but not all of it. I mean, actually, just a fraction of it. I think when I heard it was like maybe $500 billion of the $2 trillion. And even still, people like to point out how much that paid off, in the 20th century. But it was different then. We were starting from nothing. You're going to have a much bigger bang for your buck if you're starting with almost no infrastructure and then you build new infrastructure. So repairing our existing infrastructure, definitely can be useful. There's certainly some projects that are probably worth doing, but we're not going to have the same return that we're used to seeing or saw, years ago, or a lot of Asian countries had, where they also were starting with less.
Well, what's interesting, they're trying to sell it. And I was listening to President Biden yesterday. And he's talking about how he's going to do all such good things, and we're going to build up, which I love all these. It's right out of Dr. Zhivago, how you're going to build up from the bottom, and we're all part of this. And it's really interesting that they're resurrected, President Obama's comment, like, you didn't build that. Remember that comment? You didn't build that, which insults entrepreneurs like yourself and myself, because I don't remember my employees ever suffering and not getting paid for like 18 months. But no, they were back to that, and they're saying, well, this is really going to be fair because this is going to really work for you. We're going to get the low-income person, the middle-income person really doing well, because the way it did before with the top-end people making the money and running the corporations, it didn't work for the other people, even though we know statistically the income for everyone across the board really was raised nicely over the last, couple of years with President Trump in office. But what I find interesting, Allison, is they want to bifurcate this whole concept. And the first part of the bill, which is what we're talking about right now, is nice, and it's infrastructure, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to make things, and we're going to get back to work. Sort of like those shovel-ready jobs that I'm still looking for. And then the second bill that will come after the first bill will be the real one that they're going to get from the Bernie and the AOCs and the others and Kerry and the rest. And that's the green energy type stuff that we're going to play with, the climate stuff that's really going to, like you just said before, trillions of dollars for climate change. So what's your take on that? It looks like they're really formulating through a massive PR campaign how to sell this snake medicine.
I listened to the speech too yesterday, and what really both struck and disturbed me was how much he mentioned China. I remember even maybe around the time of the financial crisis talking to a famous gazillionaire who was saying how much he admired the Chinese economic model, where you had the government effectively deciding where investment went and which industries ended up growing. And I was just sort of horrified, because I'm like, that doesn't work. Industrial policy, by and large, doesn't work. It works if you have a bunch of people who are not working at all or working in very unproductive means, like, small-scale farms. You already have some technology that already works in some other country, and you bring it to them. But as a means of sustainable living standards, not to mention the human rights abuses that always seem to go along with this, it's not I don't think it's really a time-tested model. So I think given how successful America's economy has been over the last couple hundred years, letting the private sector be the primary innovator and not having too much government intervention in markets, it's strange that Biden almost seemed to be saying, hey, China's been so successful, they can't outrun us, so we're going to do what they did.
Allison, it shows so short-sighted. I was living in Japan in the late 80s and the early 90s. And during that time, everybody was turning Japanese. You had to be Japanese. Mm-hmm. Everybody was buying Japanese books and management books. And an American company couldn't survive unless we copied Japan. And it was like this huge thing. They were buying Rockefeller Center. They're buying all the Van Goghs. They're buying Pebble Beach. The Japanese are taking over the world. So many American companies kind of rushed to copy that model. And when Japan hit the wall, and boy, did they hit the wall, their stock market and economy dropped faster than a wax toboggan down Mount Fuji. It was just on a free fall. And who talks about, the Japanese now being 10 feet tall? They're not. And I would caution people looking at China today to remember what happened to Japan. And what happened to Japan in the 80s and the 90s. They did not have a superior form of capitalism. Everybody thought they did. And right now you're hearing from this administration that somehow China has a superior form of capitalism.
Yeah, but ironically, and I love Allison's comment on this, Japan had an open society. You go to China, and we've all been there, and you actually, you have plants in China. It's a closed society. It's a controlled society. You control everything across the board. If you disagree, look what's happening to the people in Hong Kong right now. So you're right. Back in the 80s, that's when Die Hard was out as a very famous movie. Japanese people owning the Nakamuchi building in L.A. Also, the movie Rising Sun. Very important that people came into L.A. They're buying up everything, including part of the movie industry. It didn't work out well. Allison, this seems a bit perverse, doesn't it?
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, China is even worse. So first of all, at least Japan was a capitalist country. And
exactly.
As I said, there was some industrial policy going on, but not nearly to the same extent that China does. And as I said, it didn't, we did more, say, just-in-time, manufacturing to copy Japan. We weren't like, all right, let's have the government be the primary innovator in the economy. We're playing a much more dangerous game here. And also, I feel like China has a lot of the same challenges Japan faced, only even worse. Their demographics are a lot less favorable, and demographics really turned out to bite Japan later. And as I said, we still have sort of this model of we're going to take innovation that already exists and adopt it. Yeah, it gives you growth some time, but I've never seen that model produce sustainable innovation. Like, America has had an amazing track record of coming up with new products that never existed before. Like, I haven't seen that in these economies yet. And usually that comes from private sector innovation.
And it always will. So Allison, tell us about the Biden tax plan and how he's going to pay for this, or at least how he's proposing.
Well, it's not going to pay for all of it. I mean, it's a pipe dream that you can spend trillions of dollars and only people who make more than $400,000 in corporations are going to pay for it. I mean, obviously. And also, when you say corporations pay for it, that means we all pay for it. I mean, most of us, or at least 50% of Americans, own stock.
28%. And as you say, the world average 23%. And that's a lot. And that means we were talking about bringing all the money that was all these offshore profits and bringing back to the United States.
I thought the word was repatriating. I thought we were going to repatriate.
And the good that would do. Well, you won't do it at 28%. You won't do it. You just won't do it. Allison, thanks for being on the show. Allison Schrager from the Manhattan Institute. We really appreciate the things you do.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I are going to have some thoughts about this week's headlines. Stay with us.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, in the Washington Post, just to kind of follow up of what we were just talking with Allison, is that out of the $2.25 trillion, about $600 million, or just a little bit more than 25%, will actually go for infrastructure, things like roads and bridges and ports and so forth. And so again, it's a boondoggle. It's a tremendous amount of money not being used. Have some fancy name. Put everybody to work. We're going to build all this infrastructure. If you ask Americans, do you want to have nice and beautiful infrastructure? Do you want to have great highways and bridges and airports and all of that? Of course they're going to say yes. But this is not what this money is being used for. It's just not what this money is being used for. And then you start talking about all the green initiatives that is going to be added on top of this. I just don't know where it's going to stop. It is going to get to be a price tag like you've never seen before. And I know when we were, having shows in the past, and especially during the Obama time, and, you had the whole green energy sort of initiatives, and remember Solyndra and all the money, and all these companies were financially not viable, but a whole lot of money went to supporters of Obama and Biden and funneled back to the Democrat Party. It was just sort of this flow of money going out and then coming back in. That's what the American taxpayer money was being used for, and it didn't work. We talked about cronyism and how much cronyism there was. And when you start talking about these sorts of numbers, the corruption in the cronyism, who's going to get these contracts? Where's this money actually going to go? The payoff is in. And it is huge. It is tremendous. Hey, look, we faced this during the Obama administration. This is even so much bigger. And when we talk about Biden, Biden's a moderate. He's a moderate guy. No, he's far more progressive than Obama, and that's sad to say, because I really, really was hoping that he was going to be the president that he pretended to be.
Oh, I never had any thoughts that he'd be the president that he pretended to be, because I didn't even know if he knew what he was pretending to be. So I didn't buy into any of that. I just couldn't do that. I'm just too street to buy into all that stuff. But what's interesting, Neil, you point out Obama, and we did many shows. We went right through the whole Obama era, and it seems like it's all coming back. This is like a bad dream. It's all coming back. We're in this middle of this nightmare that we're going to get into pretty soon. And I'll tell you what bothers me. Here's what bothers me. With Obama, we had this great stimulus bill. We know where the money went. The government had winners and losers. They chose who's going to win and who's going to lose. Obama, obviously, everyone knows Solyndra. That's pretty household right now. And $500 million went into Solyndra, a little bit more, and it went nowhere, except we do know it went to the folks who were very democratically oriented, and a good chunk of that money circulated right back into the Democratic Party, which is sort of like taxpayer money really helped the Democratic Party. Kind of weird. But when I listen to what's going on right now, and you're right, you're saying, well, God, winners and losers, and a lot of this is payoffs. Well, how is it payoffs? How does this happen? Well, who are the real winners in this whole thing? If, in fact, he wants to aid and abet infrastructure, manufacturing, revitalize all this stuff, then why is it we're cutting back on energy? And if we're cutting back on energy because he says, oh, well, we're going to help make a better decision for the folks in the unions who have these great jobs and the welders and so forth, well, they can get jobs in solar panels and they can get jobs in wind projects and so forth. Well, who benefits from that, Neil? Connect the dots. Solar is done in China. Wind products in China. But the interesting thing that we're going to have everybody, he said this yesterday in his speech, we're going to make it so available through tax credits that everybody can get a plug-in electric car. Wow. Well, that sounds very, very nice that everybody could do that. But you understand that the rare earth material that goes into the batteries, that's going into the Tesla cars right now, where do you suppose the rare earth materials come from?
From China.
From China. So if, in fact, we're going to orient everything towards solar, wind, and rare earth and plug-ins.
Which, by the way, we had the governor of Alaska on.
Exactly. So he has the ability to get it.
And we have the rare earth deposits in Alaska, but,
we don't get it.
They're federally prohibited from getting it.
So is anyone out there, I want everyone else listening, think about this. Who is Biden and his administration and the handlers, the puppeteers behind Biden? Certainly a guy who can't walk up the steps of Air Force One really is going to have a problem getting into super cognitive discussions about rare earth materials and so forth. Who benefits from this? It's China. Wow. So who's into China? Who makes the money on all of this? You got to follow, like you always say, follow the money. So I find the whole thing to be very bizarre, to be very perfectly honest about it.
Yeah, exactly. And
it worries me a lot.
Yeah, so we're going to hear a lot about this, and I don't know. I mean, hey, look, Biden got the stimulus through. He got Joe Manchin to come along in the end.
Of course,
I guess there was some small modifications. Oh, by the way, did you see Joe Manchin's wife? She's got this big federal job. She got a big federal appointment. Making
it's the American way, evidently.
170,000.
Yeah, good gig.
Well, I don't know. The guy who's supposed to be the firewall against all of this, it looks to me like he's definitely under tremendous pressure and being bought off, and that's really terrible. And we got to go here. We're going to follow this up here in a second, but we got Adam Thierer coming on from the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, and we're going to talk about industrial policy here in the United States. Stay with us.
Made in America.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neil Asbury's Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, a lot more to talk about. We talked about infrastructure and all this money that we're talking, this taxpayer money, more than $2 trillion, but with actually about a quarter of that actually going to infrastructure projects. I mean, what we think of infrastructure, right? Bridges and highways and ports and airports, the things that really make our economy very efficient. I mean, we need those things. But that's not what we're getting for this $2 trillion. But we are getting a lot of debt. And that debt is going to be around a long, long time. In fact, I don't see under any circumstance when it will ever be paid. I mean, the interest will continue to accrue and accrue. There'll be no principal payments. It'll just be out there forever. And how long can forever go before you have a major, major economic impact? And that is so scary to think about. I mean, we think about what happened during COVID, and that was so terrible in the lockdowns and the economic dislocation. But I mean, if the currency just falls apart, and all of a sudden the currency is not worth anything because there's just so much of it, and it's a supply and demand thing, and the value of it just completely falls apart. And you don't have to look far to see that. You see that around the world happening many, many, many times in many places. And all that can never happen in America. Well, don't be so sure about that. I call that morphine economics. You're just putting morphine into your blood system, and you get this high, and you think that you're getting better, but no, you're getting sicker and you're getting weaker.
Well, until you crash, and then you're in trouble.
And then you have a day of reckoning. So that's what I think about this $2 trillion.
I agree with you.
Let's move on to industrial policy, and what should the industrial policy be in the United States now? President Trump, he talked about industrial policy, bringing our jobs back, and, kind of creating an environment for where that could happen. Yes, he had tariffs, and there were things in his economic plan that I disagreed with. But fundamentally, he was promoting American ingenuity and the American worker through investment in our manufacturing infrastructure here in the United States. So what does President Biden intend to do? We're very happy to have with us Adam Thierer. He is with the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. And let's ask Adam what he thinks about the Biden industrial policy and if it's good or bad for the United States. Adam, what do you think?
Well, thanks for having me, Neil. And I got to say that when you take a look at the infrastructure plan, there's a lot of stuff in there that doesn't seem to have anything to do with infrastructure. And then there are things that are right on the borderline. For example, President Biden proposes spending $50 billion with help to the semiconductor industry. Semiconductors are important. No doubt we need them, and we want to have a strong industrial base. But the question really is, should government get behind the idea of supporting or bailing out specific companies or sectors and getting into the proverbial game of picking winners and losers? And that's where industrial policy really starts to go off the rails. And you get further and further away from sort of like general investments and smart basic economic policies, steady taxes, moderate spending, deregulation, and you get into the dangerous game of government attempting to sort of stare into a crystal ball and think that bureaucrats can sort of predict the future or our future needs. That's not the path we want to go, even though I understand we're competing with China, we face international competition. But the reality is this. For the last 25 years, the whole world has lived in envy of America's digital revolution, the Internet, and everything else. That came about not primarily due to some grandiose plan or industrial policy. It came about because we got the general economics right. We had generally low taxation, generally light touch regulation for these new sectors and technologies. And that was the secret sauce that opened up a technological revolution in America.
This is a good conversation to have. What I find interesting is that we're looking at the fact that the economy is actually improving. It is improving. Statistically, it's improving. Things are looking better. Even, Citigroup this week said that they rated Carnival Cruise as a buy as opposed to not being a buy just a few weeks ago because the cruise lines weren't functioning well. But that's all going to be opening up, so they're very encouraged about that. Now, if that's an encouraging statement, that's an industry that was totally devastated as a result of the pandemic. So my question to you is this, Adam. If the economy is improving, and as the year progresses, and we get into late 2020, 21 and 22, do we really need to spend trillions of dollars for this type of improvement in the United States when an open economy can take care of itself? Free market economy, let people, get back to work, get the businesses open, collect taxes because everyone's doing better. Can that take care of itself? And do we really need to spend, $2.5 trillion here and another $2 trillion there, and God knows what else Biden has coming down the road?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's exactly right. I think there's a real danger that we're getting out ahead of ourselves with these sort of grandiose schemes to try to figure out how to prop up certain sectors or industries or technologies. And I'm not sure we've even started to see most of it. I think there's a lot more to come. And there's been talk in America, both in the Trump years and now in the Biden years, of really extreme solutions. At one point, there was discussions high up in the Trump administration about nationalizing 5G communications networks to sort of respond to the threat of China. Here in the Biden administration, it's semiconductors. So there's a lot of bipartisan efforts afoot to try to inject a lot of bureaucrats into the business of running the American economy. And I just think there's some real serious downsides, and needless to say, some serious price tags that are going to be associated with that in the long term, as you said at the start.
Hey, Adam, we got to take a quick break. We're together with Adam Thierer from the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. Still a lot to talk about. I want to talk about taxes. I think that's very, very important. And in the COVID, post-COVID surge, and how does that play together? Very important. Stay with us. Dr. Rich and Adam will be with us just in a moment.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman, and we are together with Adam Thierer from the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. So, Adam, I want to kind of set this up a little bit and get your view. COVID. Everybody's getting vaccinated. A lot of people are getting vaccinated. A lot of states now are opening up vaccinations for, just about everybody. By the end of summer, maybe 50, 60, 70% of the U.S. population will be vaccinated. And then there's going to be a lot of people that just don't want to get vaccinated. I got to tell you, I live in a household where I'm getting the vaccination as soon as I can, and my wife won't get it. So she just, she thinks, something's very scary about that vaccination that hasn't yet been fully studied. I get it. And there's going to be a lot of people like that. And I talk to more and more people like that. But the majority of people are going to get vaccinated. People are going to start getting out again. They're going to go out again. People are going to start feeling good again. You're going to start to see sports venues opening up. You're going to hopefully see Broadway open up. You're going to see concerts again. I mean, and does this happen in the fall? I mean, it very well could. And as people start feeling good about things and they're going out and they're going back to restaurants, and then we're going to get into this labor crisis. Not that people are unemployed, but there's just so much economic activity because of the resurgence and people feeling good post-COVID that I think the economy could boom. I think it could really, really boom. And what is that GDP? I mean, I think we could be hitting some really, really record numbers just because everybody's getting back out again. And there's this pent-up demand, and there's a tremendous pent-up demand. So here it is. Assuming that to be true, and I think there's a good chance it is. I mean, President Biden has got a gift. I mean, he's got an amazing gift. So if ever he was going to try to ram down these massive spending bills and tax increases, and the U.S. economy is recovering like really, really strong, and I think that we'll be at the head of the world too in this too. By the way, I think that the American economy is going to come roaring back like nowhere else in the world. Could this potentially give him cover to be able to do some of these sort of outrageous economic things?
Yeah, it very well could. I think there's a real serious chance that that sort of thinking, that sort of efforts could boost his efforts to really greatly expand government spending and intervention in a variety of fields. I mean, but what we can't forget is that even if we're in better times here in coming months, and I think you're right, we definitely will be, and that will help the economy and therefore help the president. The reality is that even in good times, every dollar we spend showering some special interest with some sort of favoritism is a dollar that has to come somewhere else out of somebody's pocket in our economy. And when I talk broadly about the problem with industrial policy of picking winners and losers, the ultimate losers are the people you don't hear about who are having to spend all this money bailing out sectors or industries or just showering favorite interests with support. This is the fundamental problem with the cronyism that both the left and the right rightly decry, but then all too often just turn around and say, let's do it again. Let's just find other ways to shower friends with money. And today we're talking about semiconductors, and in the past it's been other sectors that politicians have said let's favor them because they're in our district or whatever else. And
well, I'll give you an example that just came up in the last week, and they're starting to push really heavily. And according to Joe the Schmo in the morning, Joe Scarborough, as Mark Levin calls him, the vaccination card, the vaccination passport. So there's an example where they're going to have favorite industries, i.e. there are 225 major corporations, the number one, of course, being Microsoft, that they're going to create a card that will be, they use the word card in the sense of figuratively speaking. It will be in your phone, so it's a chip thing, chip-driven. And on that card, they're going to have corporations create the platforms or platform that will be ultimately selected by government. Isn't that remarkable? That will be your passport to get and do and function in the United States and around the world. Wow. Okay. So there's, a little cronyism. Isn't that strange?
But I see, but Rich and Adam, I see all kinds of constitutional issues with that.
I see tons of, yes, given that is a constitutional argument to have.
That's headed to the courts.
Well, not only that, it's headed to Hogan's Heroes. When someone would say, do you have your papers? And you would say no. And they say, take this man away. You saw that every week on Hogan's Heroes. That scares me. But what I'm saying is that when the government makes these decisions as to who will create and do and function as Obama administration did, look at the downside of what happened, even with, the car czar. Remember that? We had a car czar. We had a guy who knew nothing about cars, never worked in the car industries. He's running General Motors. Rick Wagner's thrown out. I've never heard of a president saying, that CEO and chairman you got, the heck with him. He's gone. But we got a car czar here who he does drive a Chevy and he does not buy one. But other than that, he's never been in the car industry. Winners and losers. The winners in that case seem to be all the folks who are on the right side of the table. And that was the unions and so forth. The other guys took a big hit.
Or perhaps the left side of the table.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You're very good, Neil. See, that's why you're here.
So, Adam, what do you think about that? And talking about the cards, DeSantis, governor of Florida this week, said that he's going to take an executive action against vaccine passports. So, that battle is already starting to take shape.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I can't comment on the vaccines issues, but I can't comment on the question of favoritism and the fact that, as we've seen again and again throughout history, it's the biggest, most well-entrenched corporate interests in Washington that ultimately is there lining up and getting their pockets filled with support when there's these grandiose types of schemes on the table, whether they're vaccine passports or semiconductor rejuvenation or whatever else. And it raises the question, not only how else could that money be spent, but what are the consequences of that money being spent? What have we crowded out, or what have we lost?
Hey, Adam, great that you're with us today. Adam Thierer from the Mercatus Center. We really appreciate what you do. Thanks for being on the show.
I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I are going to have some final thoughts for the day.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Hey, Rich, I want to follow up on this vaccination passport sort of concept. Hey, I get it. I can understand why, people would want to have that. You're on an airplane. You want to know everybody's vaccinated. You just talked about the cruise ship industry and how that industry is starting to come back. And think about what happened to these cruise ships that were out to sea for days and weeks and even months, and they could not even find a port that would accept them. Right?
Sort of like Ship of Fools.
There was a ship that was sailing in between Argentina and Chile down in South America. About as far away from North America as you can get. And they actually had to come to Florida to find a place that they could actually dock. Scary stuff. So, for that industry to come back, do they need to have vaccination passports to make people feel comfortable? Go to a Broadway show. You're packed in there like sardines. I mean, there is no social distancing there. And these theaters are small, relatively small.
Mm-hmm.
So if you took every other seat, you're down to like you don't have enough tickets to sell. So how can?
Oh well, you know what they can do with that, Neil? Come on, they're gonna double the price of the ticket.
Well,
you don't think people
that.
would pay 1.5 to 2.0 more than they would normally pay to get back into a Broadway show? I'll make a bet they would.
Well,
this is New York, for God's sake.
Well, certain people would.
They would do that.
Certain people would, but it does definitely cut into who can afford and who cannot afford to go to a show.
If they don't get Hamilton up pretty soon, Hamilton's going to be dead for the second time.
That's good. That was pretty good.
I thought so.
So I'm taking the contrary view for a second, that I could see why vaccination passports could be attractive in some segments, but just fundamentally it goes against the American sort of independent. We're living our life. The government stay away. We want to live our lives the way we want to live our lives, and this is a government grab of just trying to get everybody documented. Isn't that funny? Documented. All of our citizens, they want to get documented. Now the people who are not documented, who cares? Come in anyway. But I don't know. It's kind of conflicting, but I just don't see how this is going to fly constitutionally and in the courts. It's going to be in the courts. If it's not, the documents are already being drawn up right now, I'm sure, to file somewhere in Texas.
Well, I think you have to look at it in a more broad landscape. Yes, when you look at the original concept, well, don't you think it's, this is how they get things passed. Don't you think it's fair? Don't you think it's right that we have something that proves that you're healthy, that you're protected, that prophylactically speaking, you're not going to get somebody sick? Okay,
yeah, but how about
can't argue with that, can you?
But how about other diseases?
Well, exactly.
There's this privacy thing in the United States.
Okay.
Hey,
what about HIPAA? What about HIPAA? I can't even talk to my son's doctor because he's over 18. He's 30, and I can't, as his father, have a conversation. But wait a minute. So you can't talk about that because of HIPAA. But what worries me, Neil, is what they want to attach to it. And when you look at the players that are getting involved in it, Microsoft, Facebook, others, they want to merge your credit. They want to merge payment solution. They want to merge your health. What they will be able to do is think, track, get the psychographics, demographics, everything about you will be on that card, for lack of a better term. What they do with that data, as they say in the movie Sneakers, it's all about the X's and O's. That's where life is at right now. That's in Robert Redford's movie Sneakers. Anyone out there should go see it. You'll understand. Great. Go on Netflix and see it. But that's the scary part. It's what the unintended consequences are and how that will track. What if they say, listen, you can't go from state to state anymore without having a passport? Well, whoa, that really infringes upon the America's right of freedom, and that's what made us such a unique country. So I think there's a lot more that goes into it, and I don't think we should just rally around the flag boys because we think it's a great idea to protect everybody with a card. I think we have to figure out how to protect us from that card if, in fact, we're going to have something to allow us to transport ourselves around the world.
Yeah, hey, Rich, we got to protect ourselves against the card. That was very clever, and it's very correct. The card is supposed to protect us against others. Rich, unfortunately, we're out of time, but boy, what a wonderful show. What a wonderful, wonderful time spending together with you, as always. But unfortunately, this show is over. But we're going to be back again next week for another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.